everybody. Okay, so yes, we are live streaming. We are recording. I think we're set to go. Okay. Hi, welcome back to day 2 of Neuroimaging at Scale. And today we're actually going to try to get you guys to be a little bit more hands-on and talk about how to bids convert data so that we can think about how to preprocess it and how to query it to later today and tomorrow. I'm also joined by Michael. Say hi, Michael.
Hey, everyone.
We're going to start just by going back to that idea of bids conversion. So I'm going to show you, I said yesterday that bids conversion is meant to be so simple that you don't actually need Descript to be able to do it. So I'm going to walk through the first tutorial walkthrough that exists in the Bids Starter Kit, just to show how bids conversion could happen without scripting. This tutorial and what I'm walking through is actually entirely available online for you to scroll if you prefer. Wait, I'm going to share my screen first. Okay, and move this over. Cool. Okay. So in here, we're going to go to the Bids Starter Kit. And in the Bids Starter Kit, I just wanted to show you part 1A, which is the introductory walkthrough. Because I think going through this, I recommend, if it's not coming through quite as easily, that you can try to do it at home. You should be able to do all of this at home. This is an example of how to bids convert directly from available Dicom data. Specifically, the example they use is a test-retest pilot data set from the NKI. From the NKI multiband imaging pilot. This data is all available actually through Indy. All you need to do to actually have access to this data is to get an account with NITRIC. And once that account exists, then it should work. Yeah, as long as you're signed into NITRIC, then you should have download permission. But you need to be signed into NITRIC when you're on this page. And then once you have that data, I'm not going to go through all of the download. You can download, in this case, they're just downloading the first 2 subjects for an example. You should see a Dicom folder, which looks like a lot of Dicom folders that might come straight from the scanner. Called Dicom, it has this, this number, which is actually the subject ID. And then it has all of these folders, and every individual folder actually contains files that contain one scan. So the Dicom folder will kind of look like it is. The nice thing with this is that now once you have this Dicom folder, you can use the JSON editor. If you download even the command line version of Dicom to NIX, you could point it to
sorry, we can't see your screen. If you are sharing the screen or supposed to be
I thought I was sharing. Let's see.
Sorry, thank you.
Wait, where is my cursor? Oh, I didn't push the last button. Okay, there it is. Sorry. Okay. So to go back, now you see my screen? Okay. Sorry. So this data, what I'm going to this page here is actually the first page in the Bids Starter Kit tutorial. And this Bids Starter Kit tutorial is actually linked to the HackMD page. I believe this is also linked to the slides. So first step is download the data, which goes through this site. The only thing that you should need to you need to do in order to get an account to download this data is get an account with NITRIC. And once you download the data, you should see a folder structure of the downloaded data called Dicom. And inside Dicom, you have this converted version, or you have the Dicoms and all the individual Dicoms. Because there's so many Dicoms, they're separated into folders according to the individual scans that happened. And then you should see that there's actually also a Nifty folder at the same level, and there's Nifties inside. Okay. Oh dear. Okay, so this data has actually, wait. If you don't see Nifty scans, then this is the case when you will use Dicom to NIX, which should create the Nifties and the sidecar JSON files for you. I thought they had a picture of this. Oh yeah, they do have it here. Okay. Oh yeah, okay, so the first step that they're doing actually to convert is creating a folder called Nifty, where it will include, which will actually be the Bids dataset folder. And the first thing that they're putting inside the Bids dataset is a data description file. So a data.description file is a required file for the Bids format, and it only actually has two required fields. The first is actually the name of the dataset, so that someone who's going through multiple datasets can figure out what this is called. And the second is the version of Bids that you're using. So in this case, they're saying 1.0.2. And you can figure out which version you're using by checking against the specification. Okay. Then all you need is Dicom to NIX, and this actually you can download with the mriqc GUI, so that's what they're doing here. And the Dicom to NIX actually exists as a GUI in itself, as well as mriqc, which makes these really cool 3D renderings of the brain. And then you can use Dicom to NIX actually just to convert all of your Dicoms into Nifty format. And when you use the new Dicom to NIX version, when you will get a Nifty file, but you should also get this file. So this is the JSON that you're going to need with that Bids metadata. And then actually all you need to do after you've converted is to rename those files according to the Bids naming convention. And put them in the folders that exist. So this entirely is a data set where all they did was point and click, convert from Dicom to Nifty, and rename all the files. And you can see that this worked really well because there was only 2 subjects. And one important thing is that literally every time they do a step, in this case, they're going to the online Bids Validator and checking if they have a valid Bids data set. So a couple of things to notice as they're going is that the first thing they did was convert the INAT for the first session for this subject, and they nested those within folders, and then they converted DWI. And once they converted DWI, they had to rename these files. And notice how you have the same beginning file name, but for a DWI file, you have the sidecar JSON, but you should also have bval and bvec files, and those should come directly from the Dicom when it's converted to Nifty format. And then finally, the last part is fMRI, which is a little bit more complicated because there's a few fMRI tasks here. So fMRI tasks need this. So when you're using fMRI, they all have the suffix bold, but they also have this task keyword, which has to say what the actual task that they were doing. So in this case, it looks like there's 3 tasks. There's a checkerboard, there's an eye movement, and there's a breath hold. And then there's also a rest. And in this case, this is important. In this case, it looks like they did rest. They did it actually, you can see these weird names. This is because they did rest with different time resolutions in this particular data set. So in this case, if you have something else that you need to use to differentiate your files, that you can't actually just rename, that it's better, don't rename the task, add this extra ACK flag for acquisition to say that there's something different in the acquisition parameters, even though the subject was doing the same thing. So in this case, they decided to use an ACK flag and change the TR. So say there's a time resolution of 645 milliseconds and a time resolution of 1400 milliseconds and time resolution of 2500 milliseconds. So they finally have this one participant structured the whole way they have below. And then they go to validate the data set. And they still get 2 errors. The 2 errors are that for every task, you need additional metadata to say what that task was. And for slice timing, it looks like something odd happened with slice timing. So for task name, and this is the important part, yeah, you need to add task name to the JSON. But you also need to add information about the task at the top level of the data set or sidecar to the car. Okay, so that's one example that you can actually go through, and you can actually go through on your own computer without ever having to script anything. You'll notice it's a lot in this case with no scripting. You're going to have a lot of copying and pasting and a lot of renaming files, which is prone to a lot of human error, which is why it's very nice to actually use a script to do this process. Which is why if you go back to the tutorials, part 2 and part 3 show you 2 ways to actually script that file renaming process. And with that, I'm going to move over to Michael, who has another example of, who's going to go through another simple example, which is going to be a bit more scripted of doing the same process. Before we do that, we'll ask if there's any questions. Wait, stop sharing. I'll stop share and I'll open up chat. Cool. Are there any other questions that we haven't answered? I saw one question about NII versus NII.gz format. Yeah, mostly we work with NII.gz, which is just a zipped version of the NII format, and most readers and pretty much everything I know will work with the zipped format as well, which will save a lot of disk space. I think excluding potentially SPM, which is MATLAB, and we don't use it on Signet. So. Yeah, fmriprep definitely, I think, reads and writes by default out to NII.gz. Michael, do you want to go through potentially a more scripted example?
Yeah, sure, I can. So I've written out the kind of assignment for today on the HackMD document. And I guess the goal is we have a couple of data sets that we've loaded onto Signet. But you're also free to use your own data sets if you have them. And the first thing you can do is, if you're using the data sets on Signet, you can create a symbolic link to your own home folder. And here I've shown you an example. And if you're using Signet also, you don't have to install DCM to NIX. It's available as a module that can be loaded. So I'll take you through a simple data set that we loaded on there. And so Signet's created this new Jupyter notebook. So the interface is very similar to the binder that we used yesterday. I'm just going to paste it in the chat. And it'll just allow you to use all the modules that have been installed on Signet in here. Oh, Amin said they're troubleshooting downloading the Dicom files. Oh yeah, I noticed that the Dicom files that Aaron mentioned in her tutorial, I think you might need to request access for them ahead of time. So I think it'd make more sense to either use the SciNet ready data sets or if you have your own data set. So now that I'm in the SciNet Jupyter Notebook, I'm going to create a new terminal session. And so right now I'm in my home folder, and in here I've created a data folder. And I've also created, so the first thing I'm going to do is create a symbolic link from the data set to my home folder. And we're using the IXI dataset. It's a pretty simple dataset. If we look at it, so there are two subjects here, subject 100 and subject 101. And in the scans folder, we see that they have 3 different anatomical scans, a T1, T2, and PD. I'm not too sure what the MRA folder is, but we can ignore that for now. So now I'm also going to make a bids folder, and this is where we'll be outputting all of our converted data. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type in module avail, and this is going to show me all the SciNet modules available to us. And I'm going to module load the DCM to NIX module. And if I want to use it, I can type in DCM to NIX, and then I think, yeah, so if you just type in DCM to NIX, it'll show you all of the help documentation. And this will help us kind of structure which arguments we want to use. So I want to use the -b flag to create the bids JSON file. So I'm going to use that. The other important thing is if you want to compress the nifties, you would use the -z flag over here. And then sometimes if you really want, this could help sometimes if you're trying to, if you want to make converting the data set a lot easier, is you can output the file with a specific kind of format. So if you just want to output, I think by default it outputs in a specific way, but if you wanted to include the series description, the echo number, any kind of like scan parameters like the manufacturer, the name of the participant, you can control all that with this -f flag. So you'll see here the default is to output the file name, the protocol name in the Dicom headers, the time at which the scan was done, and the series number. So this is default, but you can customize this. I'm just going to leave this as is. And the next thing we need to do is specify the output folder. So I'm going to use the -o flag and feed it into the bids folder. And lastly, I'm going to feed it in the input folder, which is the IXI dataset. Unable to find any Dicom images. I wonder if this is a permissions thing. Let me try using the source. Oops, it looks like this data set is all nifties. So we have to use another one. 1 second. So there was another data set. I think it was called Bids tutorial data. Yeah. So Katie was asking if you have to do a subject loop. So what dsym2nix will do is, by default, if you give it the parent folder, it'll just bulk convert everything. In terms of file naming, sometimes it might make it easier to do things in a for loop, especially if you're trying to script things out. But for this example, because I think there was only 1 or 2 subjects, I'm just doing the kind of bulk convert of all of the files at once. So now it looks like it's running. And it's outputting a log for us on what changes it's making to each of the files. So if we check out our bids folder, so for this example, it was just 1 single subject. So I think what I'm going to do is call this subject 1. It's going to make the folder for subject 1. We don't have any sessions. Otherwise, I would go into subject 1 and make a session folder. But it looks like we have a couple of different modalities. We have anatomical data, diffusion data, field maps, and functional data. Yep, it creates individual nifties for every single scan. And I think dsym2nix is pretty intelligent in the way that it creates these nifties. Sometimes you might have like 1 series number, but 2 different kind of scan parameters within it, and it'll be able to tease it apart like it's doing with this field map. So like here, you'll see that it's grabbing the different magnitude files and the phase different files all in one. So I'm going to make a couple of different folders. I'm going to make an anat folder, a func folder, fmat folder, and a DWI folder. And then from there, I'm going to move the right scans to the right place first. So if we look at our bid specification, go to the MRI section, it tells, oh, actually, the first thing I should be doing is creating a dataset description folder, JSON. So I'm going to create a dataset and description JSON. And the first thing that it wants is the name of the dataset. So that's going to be Bids tutorial. And the second thing that it wants is Bids version, I think. Yeah, Bids version, okay. And since the spec is currently at 1.4.0, that's going to be the Bids version that we're going to use. And I'm just going to save that. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to move all of the Flare files to the NAT folder. Same thing with the T1 and T2. Next, we're going to do to the diffusion data. And then the field maps. And lastly, we're going to move the func data over to the bold, or sorry, to the func folder. And now we're just left with these localizer scans. And with bids, I guess we never really use localizer scans. They're just meant to orient the participant within the scanner. So I'm just going to get rid of them. So now that we have our subjects into the correct folders, we can start to name them. And now let's look at the bid spec to figure out how they should be named. So if we go to anatomical imaging data, you'll see that it starts with the subject. We don't have a session, so we can ignore that. This guide is also really helpful because it shows you which fields are mandatory and which ones are optional. So we always need the subject label, but all these other things like the session, the acquisition label, CE, rec, run are all optional. And the last thing that we need is the modality label. So in this case, our example would be pretty simple. Flares end-to-end flare, T1s and T1 weighted, and T2s and T2 weighted. So we're just going to rename the files by moving them. So we'll call this subject 01 underscore flare.json. And we can do the same thing with the nifty. So that's done. We can also do the same thing with the T1. And lastly, for the T2, so as you get more and more subjects, you can kind of figure out a pattern for how these things are named and then scripted out that way. In the hackmd file, I've linked a couple different bids converters that you can play around with. One of the more popular ones is HuDiconv. The other one that I really like is DCM to bids. And both of these, they kind of use a config file that's based on regular expressions. Let me go to an example. So if you know how your files are named, you can create these regular expressions here and then fill in how you want them to be moved to. So like for this example, the files are named T1W underscore 3D, and it's just going to move it to the NAT folder with the modality T1 weighted. So you can try that out if you're interested. But I'm just going to remove the other folders because they'll basically work the same way. And what I want to do next is now that we've created this bids folder, the next thing that we want to check is whether it's bids valid. And the way to do that is typically with the Bids Validator. So Aaron mentioned this yesterday. You can find it online. Because I'm on Signet, I can't really browse to the bids folder that I just created. So what I've done instead is downloaded a command line version of the Bids Validator. So I'll show you, that's linked in the hackmd file right here. So you can run this script and it should tell us if our data set is bids valid. Oops. So the script only has one argument, and that's the location of our bids data set. So it's in data/bids. So it gives us a couple of warnings. So a README is missing, and the authors field of the dataset description is missing. But we have no errors, so that means our dataset is bids valid. And it also gives us a summary. So we know we have one subject, one session, and we have a flare, T1, T2. So within the bids folder, you can play around with the IXI dataset. This one has already been converted to nifty. So if you wanted to convert that one to the bids format, you can use that. Or you can continue working with the bids tutorial dataset that has a single subject. And I also have a couple subjects in the study forest folder. It's empty right now, but I'll just move these zip folders inside, and they can be used as well. Does anybody have any questions? So while you're trying this out, if you need some help, you can also feel free to share your screen. And then I think that would make it easier to help everybody out.
One more thing, public service announcement, because we just realized this existed and it's game changing for us, but maybe not for you guys. The new Jupyter Hub allows you to load modules into your book, into your Jupyter environments via this softwares tab, which is pretty cool. Check it out, though, guys. So exciting. Look, see, get annex. Wait. Can you find get annex? Wait, how do you load it? Whoa. Okay. That's pretty cool. I don't know. This first. How do you do this? Wait, how do you actually load it? Whoa, look at that. Magical. Okay. Michael, do you need to chmod run Bids Validator? Or did you do that?
Yep, I'll do that.
Okay.
Yeah, just modified the permissions for the Bids Validator script.
Okay.
So Amin, would you feel comfortable sharing your screen to figure out where the data sets are? Oh. Could we give Amin access? Okay, there we go. So if you go to do you have access to the sign-it folder? So /sign-it?
I actually think I only have the Scratch folder.
If you type in cd /sign-it, /sign-it, and then ls. So then go to course. And SS 2020. So yeah, that's the thing. I think you won't be able to see it right away because it's not located in your home folder, but you should still be able to access it. And then 5_neuroimaging. And then it's in the data folder. Oh, okay, let's see. Can you try going into the data folder now?
Michael, I think you need to chmod 644 all the data.
644. Oh, I was doing 2770.
Yeah, make it world readable. Make sure.
Okay, yeah, I made it 644.
Maybe with an R to make it recursive.
Yeah. Can you try again, I mean? Oh.
Oh, it doesn't work.
It should. Oh, it's. I think it's world readable, but you can't actually CV into it. Sorry.
Mm.
Okay, what about now? Sorry. There you go. Okay. And I've also updated the permissions for the Bids Validator script. So I think Katie hopefully should work now.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like the study force dataset is still being uploaded to SciNet. So I think this is a big dataset. It might take a while. But for now, the BIDS tutorial data as well as the IXI dataset should both work. Oh, I think I might, maybe, let me try changing the permissions on the
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Katie, I just modified the permissions for the container. If that still doesn't work, you might need to modulo Singularity. So yeah, we'll talk about containers tomorrow. But yeah, they've created like a container for doing the bids validation instead of using the web browser. And I guess tomorrow we'll talk about using other containers like mriqc for QCing your data and fmriprep for preprocessing fMRI data.
Oh. The image problem is probably actually because you need to chmod the Singularity container too.
Yeah, I did that.
Okay.
So much modding. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention, as you're going through your bids conversion, if you could save all of your commands to a text file or like save your script to a script, we can use that for submission.
Mhm.
And if you're using a more complicated data set, you might not be able to do it all today, but that's fine. You can still submit what you have, and we'll take up if there are any missteps and try and help with that at the wrap up tomorrow. We don't really have office hours for setting up, Maurice, but we can help you now. Are we allowed to do breakout rooms in Zoom?
I don't know.
Because that might help with the setting up process.
Yeah. Hmm.
Oh, I also want to mention that today we have a couple more helpers. So aside from myself and Aaron, we also have Jerry, Jerry Chandra, Olivia Stanley, and Jason Kai, who are also available around to help out.
Mhm.
So how many breakout rooms you guys want? 3, 4, 2?
It's up to you guys.
I think for now we can just use them when people have questions, if they're specific for setting up and stuff.
Okay, create 3, and if we need more, we can add it, okay?
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think for general questions, we can take them up on the main channel. Is anybody trying this out using their own data set and is running into some problems on maybe some more complicated data?